Another attempt to talk to Matt. We live close to each other, so we ride to the school by bus together. I usually sit somewhere in the back. Matt sits in the front and is always surrounded by his friends from the soccer team. But when the bus stopped in front of our houses, I had a few seconds to talk to him. Usually we went our separate ways, but this time I wanted to ask, "How are you doing?" And maybe he'd answer, "Good, how are you?" That's how we would talk. But it didn't work out that way. I tripped and fell down the stairs. I hit my shoulder on the pavement. Matt ran up to me, helped me up, and asked, "How are you? Can you walk?" I don't know, I hurt my leg pretty bad. My leg was fine. It was just my arm that hurt. "Let me walk with you." I didn't mind. Matt held me around the waist the whole time. At the front door, the guy said, "You're home now." "Yeah, thanks for helping. My leg doesn't hurt anymore." It really didn't hurt. "It's okay," he said and smiled awkwardly. "If anything, I can always help." Matt said goodbye and left. It was finally happening. Me and Matt, alone. I only wish it had lasted a little longer. We didn't really have time to talk, especially since I had to grunt in pain to make it convincing. But even then, I had an idea that both delighted and frightened me. Hi, my name is Lila, and I want to tell you how I got a big secret. Like any decent girl, I've had many small secrets, but I've never had one that no one ever knew. Even my crush on Matt was guessed by a lot of people, especially by my mom, who saw a bunch of pictures of some guy in my room. One day she asked me who the boy was. I had to lie. One actor. I don't know if she believed me or not. I was going to do something that my mother definitely shouldn't know about. The only person I could trust was my friend Susan, and she was in Japan with her parents for 2 weeks, and I knew what she was going to say.
Lila, this is crazy. I know you like Matt, but even for you, it's too much.
I had to carry out my plan on my own. What was the point of the plan, you ask? I wanted to pretend I broke my arm. Remember my embarrassing fall? It brought Matt and I closer together, even if it was only for a few minutes. If I hadn't fallen and bruised my arm, I wouldn't have had a word with my crush. Only a few minutes into our year together. That's a disappointing statistic. I had to risk it, even at the cost of my health. At first, I thought about really breaking my arm. I could hit myself with a hammer, try jumping off the fence with my right arm out, ask someone to help me with it, but I decided to do things differently. I just made myself a fake cast. It took me a week and hours of Google searching. I typed in, "make cast with your own hands," and done. It turned out pretty good in the end. I put it on with a reserve, so I could easily take it off at home. This kind of masquerade would definitely not have been approved by my parents. I was already under the hood. After I forgot to turn off the iron when I was dreaming about Matt, I almost burned the house down. I had to act without drawing attention to myself, to play the poor girl just for Matt. But of course, it didn't work out that way. I had to explain the appearance of the cast at school, and the very next day, I was telling everyone the heartbreaking story about how I'd been hit by a car. But not because I wasn't looking around, it was because there was a kitten sitting in the driveway. And if it hadn't been for my desperate jump, but the kitten's life cost me a broken arm. The story of my heroism quickly spread around the school. By the end of the day, I was famous. Although I wasn't usually the focus of attention. Still, everyone loves kittens. Matt was impressed too. "And you threw yourself in front of a car?" he asked, still in disbelief that I could do something like that. "Yeah, I couldn't have done it any other way." "Cool," he summed up. After school, I took the bus as usual. I thought I was going to spend 15 minutes on the phone, but then Matt showed up. "May I?" he said, taking a seat next to me. Sure." We drove in silence at first. I wanted to say something, but like always, I was speechless. "What do you talk to guys about? Soccer? Do you play soccer?" I asked Matt timidly, knowing full well that he did. "Yeah," he answered briefly. We didn't say anything for a while. Maybe we should talk about movies? Everybody watches movies. Did you see that movie where the alien takes over the Earth? Isn't it great? That's disgusting. I agree, it was a terrible movie. I never knew communicating with people was so difficult. With Susan, we talked most of the time, but the subject of our conversations never changed. Guys. Even though neither of us had ever dated or even kissed anyone, we could talk about it for hours. "I think this is our stop," Matt remarked. Yeah, that's where I kind of accidentally noticed. Ugh, it's awfully heavy. I don't know why I have to carry so many books when I only have one arm left. "Maybe I can help you carry it?" I started to refuse very aggressively. "Oh, no need, I'll do it myself." "Suit yourself." "Although you can help me, the briefcase is awfully heavy." Lying again, there were only a couple of textbooks in there, but Matt decided to be a gentleman and walk me home. We said goodbye at the door again, and he offered to help me in case my arm hurt. "Okay," I answered briefly. When Matt left, I opened the front door and slipped quietly into my room. My parents weren't supposed to see me like this. I took the cast off with gusto. My arm itched terribly. Ugh, and it stank. You could say the mission was a success, if it wasn't for one but. My brother, Derek. He broke into my room without knocking. "Hey, don't you dare come barging in on me like that," I resented him. "I heard an incredibly interesting story about a certain famous girl who bravely saved a kitten and was run over by a car and broke her arm. Do you know who that is?" I knew where he was going with this. "What do you want?" And then the classic brother-sister bargaining began between siblings who didn't like each other. $20, and I'm as dumb as a fish. That's what I would have done any other way. I would have paid Derek off. But I didn't have a dime. I spent it all on my plaster masquerade. I'm broke now. "Well, then what should I do with you?" "Why don't you just say nothing and let me live in peace?" "Nah, that's boring. I'll keep quiet if you do my little errands." "What kind of errands?" I asked warily. "Nothing much." "Well, how about a deal?" I had no choice. Deal. And so began a strange period in my life that didn't last long. At school, I was with Matt. He was always there for me, trying to help me in any way he could. Like if I wanted a cup of tea, he'd just jump up and run out and buy me some tea. I was so into the role that I was always in need of something. It was as if I hadn't broken my arm, but some serious infection, and I had exactly 1 year to live. I felt no remorse. Matt was like a supermassive object in space. All my feelings were focused on him. Well, when I got home, there was Derek. I couldn't escape his all-seeing eyes. Not once. "Okay, my room is getting a little messy. If I don't clean it tonight, Mom's gonna kill me." And what? Go for it. I sighed heavily, but a deal's a deal. I didn't want that idiot to ruin my idyll with Matt. Derek got cocky one night and knocked on my door. "I'm asleep," I answered sleepily. "Then wake up." My brother was clearly up to something. "You can't do that. Let's do it tomorrow." "No, we have to do it tonight. Tom said he'd sell them tomorrow." "Who?" "It doesn't matter. Just go to Tom's and get them." "Who?" Derek made it clear he'd said all he wanted to say. I quietly took the keys to my parents' car and drove to God knows where for God knows why, because of my brother's request. I hoped I wasn't going for anything illegal. When I arrived at the place, some guy ran out of the house and knocked on my window. I reluctantly lowered it down. "Hi, I'm Tom, and you're Lila. I know you." "Well, cool. What's there to pick up?" "Here." Tom shoved a couple of comic books in my hands. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." "Just be careful. They're very valuable. One of these is worth over $20. I grabbed the comics and threw them in the back seat, then headed home, wondering what my life had become. "Here." I handed the comics to Derek with undisguised annoyance. I didn't know why it was that serious. "What do you think? Each one of them? Yeah, they're worth over $20. I've been wanting to read them for a long time. You weren't followed?" "Screw you." I went back to my room and finally fell asleep. The whole thing went on for 10 days, cuddling with Matt and then running errands for Derek. Every day. Right up until I really broke my arm. Maybe the gods were angry at me, or maybe it was just coincidence. But just like in the story I made up, I was hit by a car. Only I wasn't rescuing a kitten. I was just staring at my phone. Derek was asking me for another stupid favor. The next day I showed up at school in a real cast. Matt didn't notice much difference, except now I was in real pain. And I didn't have to pretend. There was one bright side to the situation. Derek had nothing to blackmail me with. At first, he thought it was another one of my tricks. He looked at my cast incredulously, stepped closer, and tapped on it. Ow! I cried out. It hurts! Can't you see my arm is broken? It was broken before, but it didn't hurt. It really is broken now, so I don't need your silence anymore. My brother was furious, but there was nothing he could do. It was the opposite, in fact. He did my errands now. And if he didn't want to, I had to involve my mom. Matt was still taking care of me at school, and I think he was finally starting to like me. Not because I was hurt, but because he got to know me better. And one day he asked me out on a date to a cafe. I was over the moon, but I had this stupid cast on. It made me look ridiculous. But I'd have to walk around with that thing on my arm for a month. Finally, Susan came back from Japan, and I told her my crazy story in vivid color. What would you do if your brother found out your secret and started blackmailing you? Write your answers in the comments, like the video, and share it with your friends. Share it with your friends.
快手，拥抱每一种生活。